Stella Monroe wiped the rim of a coffee cup with practiced care, her slender fingers moving almost mechanically, as if the routine offered a quiet refuge from the hum of the crowded restaurant. The scent of freshly brewed coffee mingled with the faint aroma of sautéed onions, creating a comforting familiarity within the cramped, warmly lit space. Stella was shy, always had been, and the constant chatter of patrons, the clatter of utensils, the occasional burst of laughter often felt overwhelming. She preferred to keep her head down, to move swiftly between tables unnoticed. Behind her, near the entrance, Richard Collins stood with his arms crossed, casting a glance that was more disdainful than curious. The restaurant's owner was well known for his sharp tongue and sharp suits, qualities that made him a figure both respected and feared by his staff. Tonight, his eyes lingered on Stella with a sneer that stung more than any spoken word. "You'll never amount to anything, Monroe," he snapped loudly, ensuring everyone within earshot could hear. "Too timid to even carry a tray properly, and don't think I haven't noticed how you avoid speaking up." Stella's cheeks flushed with embarrassment, but she kept her gaze lowered and said nothing. Humiliated, she felt the weight of every patron's curious stare digging into her skin. Richard's voice boomed again, switching to a cruel tone of finality. "I've had enough. You're fired. Clean out your locker by the end of the day." Her heart pounded, raw vulnerability surfacing as she gathered her apron and notepad. The restaurant suddenly felt suffocating, the air thick with judgment. She wanted to disappear. As she glanced once more at the place that had been her routine and comfort, a quiet determination sparked deep inside. Richard's words were meant to break her, yet she vowed silently that this was not the end. After the sharp echo of the doors shutting behind her, the cold evening air was both a shock and a relief to Stella Monroe. She took a deep breath, the sting of Richard Collins' words still burning her cheeks. Fired, not because she was negligent or incompetent, but simply because she had been too quiet, too reserved. The weight of his dismissal settled heavily inside her, a bitter, suffocating mix of embarrassment and disbelief. The restaurant, with its worn tables and chipped menus, had been her small, familiar world. Now, it felt distant, like watching a place she'd once belonged to from across an impassable chasm. For days afterward, Stella wrestled with a cacophony of emotions. Self-doubt gnawed at her confidence. She wondered if Richard's cruel judgment held any truth. Did she truly lack the strength to grow? Was her shyness a barrier too steep to climb? Yet, beneath the whispered uncertainties, a steady ember kindled. If Richard's biting sarcasm was meant to diminish her, it only balanced the scales of her resolve. She found herself walking past the same restaurant most evenings, peeking through the windows to catch glimpses of the familiar bustle, waitstaff weaving between tables, the clink of glasses, the low murmur of conversations drifting. It was a bittersweet ritual, a reminder of what she once had and what she intended to regain, but on her own terms. Determined not to be confined to the role Richard had cast her in, Stella began immersing herself in new worlds and challenges. Quietly, she signed up for business classes at the local community college, devouring books on finance, marketing, and entrepreneurship. Her days became a careful balance between study and part-time jobs, sometimes delivering groceries, other times working behind register counters. The people she met along the way varied. Some were skeptical of the shy woman trying to reinvent herself, others inspired by her quiet persistence. Among her old acquaintances from the restaurant, reactions were mixed. Jenny, a vivacious host with a sharp wit, often asked how Stella was managing, offering encouragement sprinkled with warmth beneath her usual teasing. "I always thought you had more in you, you know," Jenny would say with a wink, breaking through Stella's walls just enough to light a tiny spark of confidence. Others, less kind, whispered doubts or passed judgment behind her back, reinforcing the harsh labels Richard had hung on her. Word began to circulate unofficially around their small circle. Stella Monroe, the timid waitress who had been dismissed without ceremony, was now making waves in unexpected circles. A few spotted her at investor meetups, cool and precise, taking notes and asking pointed questions. Her pace was slow but deliberate. she wasn't chasing overnight success, but steady, deliberate growth. To many, it seemed an odd path for someone so soft-spoken. Meanwhile, back at the restaurant, Richard Collins remained as imperious as ever, maintaining a tight grip on his domain. He minimized Stella's absence publicly, dismissing her departures as inevitable and inconsequential. She never fit in, he said to a trusted employee with a sneer. Always daydreaming, never assertive enough. A liability. His scorn was sharpest in private moments, but he made sure his attitude permeated the workplace culture. Yet, a quiet reckoning was brewing. One afternoon, while reviewing his financial statements, Richard noticed a strange line item. Multiple investment groups had formed recently focused on local businesses. Among them, the name Monroe Capital caught his eye, a venture he didn't remember seeing before. Curiosity sparked, he dug deeper and found that Stella herself was behind the enterprise. The very same Stella he had discarded as insignificant was positioning herself as a serious contender in the investment world. Anger flared. He couldn't fathom how someone so unremarkable was now potentially holding the keys to businesses he controlled. His mind churned with schemes of dismissal and defamation, determined not to be bested by former staff who had, in his eyes, no place in his sphere. He mused aloud, "We'll see how long this little upstart lasts in the real game." Unbeknownst to Richard, Stella's journey was far from impulsive bravado. Months of sleepless nights, countless seminars, and meticulous planning had culminated in this bold step. She had partnered cautiously with a few like-minded investors who valued her meticulous nature and unwavering dedication. Her knowledge of the community's heartbeat, the customers, the employees, the gaps, gave her insights others overlooked. As news about Monroe Capital spread, whispers of surprise and skepticism filled the air. How could the shy waitress, once mocked for her silence, now be leading an investment firm eyeing local businesses? Was this a fleeting stint, or a quiet revolution? One evening, Stella found herself seated at a cafe, laptop open, poring over a proposal to acquire a small diner struggling financially. Her fingers danced over the keyboard with an ease born of passion and determination. She paused, eyes lifting as she saw a headline buzzing across her screen: "Local investor plans big moves in city's food scene." There, embedded in the article, was a mention of her decision to bid on the very restaurant where she had once worked, the one Richard Collins owned. Her heart fluttered not with fear, but with a steady resolve. The prospect wasn't just about business, it was personal. Richard had underestimated her, dismissed her, and snubbed her potential. Now, as she read the lines about future plans to revitalize the area's culinary spaces, she felt a quiet satisfaction growing inside her. That night, as she closed her laptop and stepped into the cool air, questions circled her mind. Would Richard respond to her bid with the same disdain? How would her former colleagues react? Most of all, could she truly overcome the lingering shadows of self-doubt that sometimes made her hesitate? Still, beneath the swirling uncertainty, one thought stood clear. Stella Monroe was no longer just a shy waitress waiting in the background. She was a force quietly gaining momentum. And as the sun rose over the city, a new chapter was beginning, one where past hurts might just be the foundation for future triumph. Have you ever been underestimated or thought too quiet to make a difference? Sometimes, the most powerful changes start with the softest voices. Stay with us to see how Stella turns the tides. The hum of the city outside seemed distant as Stella Monroe sat at her modest apartment desk, a soft glow from the desk lamp casting gentle shadows across her features. The room was cluttered but functional, textbooks stacked beside her laptop, scribbled notes scattered about, a whiteboard pinned with deadlines and milestones. She ran her fingers through her dark hair, eyes flicking to a framed photo of the small restaurant where she had once waited tables, a place that felt simultaneously like a prison and a home. Despite the outward signs of progress, doubt crept in like an uninvited guest. She had climbed steep hills, weathered long nights of study, and found a new world in the world of numbers and negotiations, but would it be enough? Was she truly ready to face Richard Collins again, to confront the man who had publicly dismissed her as insignificant? The thought sent a shiver through her. She feared not only his ridicule, but the possibility of losing everything she had worked so hard to build. Her phone buzzed on the desk, pulling her attention. It was Jenny, her former co-worker, now a friend quietly supporting her behind the scenes. The message was brief but steadying. "You've got this, Stella. Just remember who you are beneath it all." A small smile touched Stella's lips. She wasn't alone in this. Meanwhile, the world around her began to stir with whispers once again. Richard, having learned of Stella's intentions to acquire the restaurant that bore his name, ramped up his campaign to protect his empire, to discredit the once shy waitress turned businesswoman. At management meetings, he casually spread hints, thinly veiled and dripping with derision, about the risks of handing control to someone too inexperienced to run a business, especially one as delicate as this restaurant. The staff, dimly aware of the tension, whispered behind closed doors. Some remembered Stella's quiet perseverance and began to question Richard's harsh judgments. Others remained skeptical, wary of change. One afternoon, Sarah, a waitress who had often admired Stella's quiet strength, approached delicately. "I don't know if you want to hear this," Sarah began, voice low, "but some of us think you'd make a better leader than he ever did." The words, simple but sincere, hovered in the small space between them. Stella blinked in surprise, warmth spreading through her chest despite the turmoil around them. "Thank you," she whispered, "that means more than you know." In the following weeks, Stella's momentum grew, but so did the shadows cast by doubt and opposition. Richard's methods grew sharper, rumors whispered in business circles, questions about Stella's financial backers, and challenges to her credibility were volleyed with increasing intensity. The community where she had once been invisible now watched her transformation with a mix of skepticism and curiosity. Caught in the maelstrom, Stella grappled with internal battles just as fierce as the external ones. Self-doubt whispered in quiet moments. Was she pushing too far, too fast? Could the fragile confidence she had nurtured hold through the storm? Her reflections often spiraled late into the night, leaving her drained but determined. A breakthrough came unexpectedly. During a casual conversation with an old supplier, Stella learned that Richard's financial dealings were not as stable as he portrayed. There were cracks in his empire, overextended credit lines, unpaid bills, and a growing discontent among key partners. It was a revelation that both excited and frightened Stella. This insight could tip the balance in her favor, but it also meant confronting Richard would be more volatile than ever before. The stakes had escalated beyond a personal vendetta. This was now a battle for survival, not just for Stella's dreams but for the businesses and people entwined in the community. Late one night, reviewing documents she had painstakingly gathered, Stella's thoughts spiraled. Her pulse quickened as she contemplated the risk and reward. Doubts surfaced. Was she certain of her own capabilities? Yet, beneath the anxiety, a steady resolve took root. If the restaurant was to have a future that embraced empathy and fairness, if those who had been dismissed out of hand were to find a place to thrive, she could not shrink back now. She nodded at her reflection in the window, as if making a silent promise. "I can do this," she breathed. In a more quiet and intimate moment, Stella confided in Jenny, voicing the doubts she had kept bottled inside. Jenny listened patiently, her usual playful energy subdued by the gravity of Stella's words. "You've come so far," Jenny reminded gently. "None of us saw it coming, but that doesn't mean you're not ready. Your strength has always been in your humility and resolve. Richard's tactics won't work if you don't let them." As the days passed, Stella gathered a small circle of supporters, former colleagues, community members, local investors, all drawn not only by the promise of financial gain but by the hope of a new beginning. Their quiet encouragement helped reinforce her core belief that change, while difficult, was possible and necessary. At the same time, the tension reached a crescendo. Richard, sensing his hold slipping, launched an aggressive campaign to undermine Stella's reputation. Anonymous messages circulated, questioning the legitimacy of her investments, his loyal staff were urged to resist any changes she proposed. Behind closed doors, he vowed to make sure Monroe's dream dies before it even begins. But Stella refused to be cowed. At a community fundraiser she attended, she spoke with calm conviction to those who would listen, reaffirming her commitment not just to business success but to revitalizing the spirit of the neighborhood. Her voice, once so soft it was easily ignored, had grown steady and sure. The shy waitress who had once blended into the background was emerging as a leader. And yet, as the moment of confrontation drew closer, she knew the path ahead would test every ounce of her resolve. She faced moments of solitude, where the echoes of Richard's scorn whispered of defeat. Still, she clung to the vision of what could be, a restaurant not ruled by arrogance but run with heart. As she prepared the final notes of her presentation and rehearsed answers to possible attacks, Stella paused to reflect on her journey. She was no longer defined by any one word: shy, timid, insignificant. She was an investor, a leader, a woman determined to reclaim her story. But more than anything, she was a testament to quiet courage. Have you ever had to face someone who underestimated you so completely they spurred you to do the impossible? Sometimes the fiercest battles come from within. Keep following Stella's journey. Her fight is far from over. Tension hung in the air like a thick fog as Stella Monroe stepped into the grand boardroom of the restaurant's corporate office. The long mahogany table gleamed beneath the recessed lighting, surrounded by stern-faced investors, staff representatives, and, most prominently, Richard Collins himself. His sharp eyes gleamed with a dangerous pride, the self-assured posture of a man who had long ruled this domain with an iron grip. Stella's heart beat steadily, her hands folded calmly before her as she took her place at the head of the table, ready to confront not only Richard but the very system he represented. The room buzzed with murmurs as Stella began her presentation. She spoke with a measured confidence that surprised some and unsettled others. "Thank you all for gathering here today," she began, voice clear and composed. "I'm here not just as a prospective investor, but as someone who believes in the power of this restaurant to be more than a place to dine. It can be a pillar of community, a place where employees are valued, and innovation is embraced." She clicked through slides displaying detailed financial projections, a comprehensive plan to renovate the space while preserving its charm, and innovative marketing strategies to attract a broader clientele. More importantly, she emphasized a commitment to the staff who had been overlooked for too long. "Our greatest asset," she voiced, "is the team that serves this restaurant every day." Richard leaned forward, a thin smile twisting his lips. "Ms. Monroe," he interjected, "while your enthusiasm is commendable, this business requires hard-nosed experience. Your background as a waitress hardly instills confidence in your ability to lead a successful enterprise." His words drew a few nods from some investors, a sharp reminder of the many who doubted her. But Stella met his gaze without flinching. She had prepared for this. With calm precision, she revealed insights that she'd uncovered about Richard's management. "I appreciate your perspective, Mr. Collins. Yet, it's clear that some of the financial choices made under your leadership have put this restaurant at risk. High debt levels and supplier issues need addressing. That's where I intend to start." Gasps rippled around the room. Richard's eyes narrowed, his mask slipping for just a moment before he reclaimed his composure. "This is a personal attack disguised as business," he declared sharply. "Your ambition blinds you." Before the situation could escalate, several staff members, including Sarah and Jenny, stood in support of Stella, their voices joining hers in affirming the need for change. "We've seen what happens when profits come before people," Sarah noted earnestly. "Stella's plan means respect for workers and community. That's what we need." The tide began to turn. Several investors exchanged looks, their skepticism tempered by the genuine passion emanating from Stella and her supporters. She wasn't merely an outsider, she embodied the spirit and hope of those who had been muted and overlooked. As the meeting drew to a close, whispers circulated about Stella's vision. Richard's pointed objections had become less persuasive, losing power in the face of undeniable facts and heartfelt testimonials. The boardroom was no longer a battleground but a space of possibility, a pivot toward a future where the restaurant might thrive anew. Outside the room, Stella felt a mix of exhaustion and exhilaration. She had faced Richard head-on and emerged not broken, but unshaken. Her voice, once quiet and hesitant, now commanded attention. Back inside, Richard retreated to a private office, simmering with frustration. The unexpected resistance from investors and staff unsettled his usual dominance. He pondered his next move. Would he find a way to regain control, or would this chapter mark the beginning of his downfall? Meanwhile, news of the meeting began to spread through the neighborhood, sowing seeds of hope among patrons and workers alike. Stella became a symbol not just of change, but of courage, proof that resilience could rewrite even the strictest narratives. That evening, as Stella walked under the glow of streetlights, she allowed herself a moment of quiet relief. The battle was far from over, but the path forward was clearer. Her journey had evolved from doubt and humiliation to empowerment and leadership. The boardroom twist had illuminated truths that neither money nor power could suppress. Stella Monroe was no longer the shy waitress in the corner. She was a force reshaping the very world that had once dismissed her. How do you think perseverance can transform even the most entrenched challenges? Stay tuned as Stella's story's next chapter unfolds. The final confrontation awaits. The morning dawned crisp and clear, sunlight filtering through the city's familiar skyline, casting long shadows over the restaurant that had been both Stella Monroe's place of past hurt and the stage for her unfolding future. The atmosphere inside was a mix of nervous anticipation and cautious optimism. Investors, staff, and community members gathered to hear the final vote on the proposal that would decide the restaurant's fate, and Richard Collins's reign. Stella entered the room with steady steps, her usual shyness replaced by a calm confidence that had been forged through months of struggle and determination. She greeted familiar faces, some warmly, others warily, but there was no mistaking the resolve shining in her eyes. This was the culmination of more than just business acumen. It was the result of years of quiet endurance and steadfast belief in her own worth. Richard took his usual place at the head of the table, his smug expression tightening as he saw Stella's steady presence. He leveled a sharp look at her, silently daring her to flinch. But she met it head-on, unwilling to give him any hint of weakness. The board facilitator called the meeting to order, and the discussion began. Investors who had once stood with Richard now voiced support for Stella's vision, citing her thorough plans and the energy she had inspired in the community. Staff members spoke up, recounting their experiences and hoping for a future where their work would be valued beyond mere profits. Richard's voice cut through the room, attempting one last defense. This restaurant has a legacy built through years of careful management. To hand it over to someone so young, whose only experience was waiting tables, is reckless. His tone was sharp, an effort to rally his dwindling supporters. But the tide had shifted. One by one, voices countered him, emphasizing Stella's strategic approach, her respect for both financial responsibility and people, and the clear need for change in a market that had grown increasingly competitive. When the time for voting arrived, Stella's heart pounded in her chest. As each name was called and support for her proposal grew, a quiet hope blossomed within her. Finally, the vote was nearly unanimous, a testament to the transformation she had inspired. The deal was approved. Richard, now stripped of control, stood abruptly and left the room without a word. The weight of defeat was palpable, his once unshakable dominance crumbling in the face of resilience and renewal. For Stella, the victory was bittersweet. It was not just about business success but about reclaiming her dignity and demonstrating to everyone, and herself, that quiet strength could upend even the most entrenched judgments. In the weeks that followed, the restaurant underwent a remarkable transformation. Stella assembled a leadership team that shared her values, fostering a workplace where respect and encouragement flourished. Former skeptics were won over by her inclusive approach and the tangible improvements to both atmosphere and service. The community responded warmly, patrons returning in growing numbers, drawn by the renewed energy and sense of belonging. Stella's work extended beyond the restaurant's walls, sponsoring local events and creating opportunities for young people eager to learn and grow. Richard's defeat sent ripples through the local business circle and beyond. His reputation, once secure and intimidating, now bore the consequences of his harsh judgments and dismissive arrogance. Those who had once rallied to his cause began to question the cost of leadership rooted in fear rather than respect. Looking over the bustling dining room one bright afternoon, Stella felt a sense of peace that had once seemed unattainable. The shy waitress who had quietly served coffee and wiped tables had blossomed into a leader who valued kindness, perseverance, and community. Her journey was a reminder that the loudest voices are not always the strongest, and that genuine strength often comes from those who listen and observe. As she spoke softly to a small group of new employees, encouraging them to bring their whole selves to the work, Stella's thoughts drifted to the future, full of promise and hard-won hope. If Stella's story inspired you to believe in your own quiet strength and resilience, why not share your thoughts below? Don't forget to subscribe so you won't miss the next inspiring journey. See you in our next story.